Well, Frank, we've got some folks in here. I want to be respectful of
Yeah,
everybody's time, so we can
let's
probably
get
start
going.
looking at kicking this off. I want to thank you all again for jumping in here and joining us today. Um, we're really happy to bring this to you. We've had a lot of requests for, how should we really go about building a cybersecurity program? But more importantly, what are the key components that really go into a cybersecurity program, and why should our customers care? And really, hopefully, that'll come out in our conversation today. For those of you that don't know both of us, I'll introduce myself first only because I'm talking. My name's Brian Doyle. I'm the founder and CEO of VCIO Toolbox. And with me today, I have, and Frank, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Frank Raimondi with IGI, or Nodeware is their product and our big brand, but happy to be here and look forward to the discussion. I think, as you said there, Brian, the what we're focusing on is really the as we call them, the pillars, the key starting points and or key fundamentals of a even more sophisticated program. So we'll talk through that, but I'm really excited to be here and share our thoughts and look forward to some questions and discussion with the audience.
Yeah, no, we're excited as well. Frank and Nodeware have been a fantastic partner for those of you that are on the call from a VCIO toolbox standpoint. And one of the best parts is Frank and I love getting together and trying to share what little parts we know of the world with as many people as we can. So, we'll kick things off to kind of level set it a little bit around some of the statistics that we're facing here. Obviously, we talk about breaches a lot. We talk about the threats. We're having those conversations with our customers. And a lot of times we focus on those from a fear, uncertainty, and doubt perspective. This can happen to you, right? And a lot of those SMBs that we primarily cater to here in the MSP market, they don't believe it's going to happen to them, right? So we need to kind of help them understand why this is a concern. So I'm going to go a little bit of right to left here and really just kind of focus first on, industries with incidents and breaches, right? And if you go down to the top incidents with breaches right there in the middle, you see the big four that are obviously facing that. That would be your finance and healthcare, our finance groups, that includes insurance, your healthcare concerns, which includes pharma, your professional service groups, that includes your accounting firms and law firms, and then, of course, public government, right? I don't think any of those probably come as a shock to anybody, but that's where the main breaches are coming into play. And the most targeted data types that they're going after probably are no surprise to anybody either. Let's get those credentials first because that's the key to the door. But then we're able to pull in personal information, medical information, bank information, and really start looking at, how this stuff is impacting or, how we can use that to our advantage. Usually a financial advantage too is what we're looking for. So, when we go a little bit deeper and we start thinking, what are the top causes? I don't think this will come as a shock to anybody on this call. You hear it all the time, but it's that human element, right? So when we look at all the tools that, help automate us getting information, that's only one part of the equation for the MSP and one part of the opportunity from where I sit. The real reality is there's a human element to security as well. Those policies and procedures exist for a living reason, and we really got to start looking at how we can mitigate that risk just by getting our people educated in the process. We talked already about those breaches involving credentials, and then there's 13% involving ransomware. That's an interesting number to me, at least, Frank. I don't know how you feel about it. I would have thought that number would have been a little bit higher by the stories that are out there. But it shows that really man is the bigger beast, I guess.
Well, and some of it's some of it's I think sort of the hidden, or it's a combination of things. I do agree that's probably a bit higher in reality, but I mean, they're all factors that we have to be, an MSP and their customers have to be watching out for, and
I think certainly we can also take into consideration with that number, that's probably reported incidents. And as
yeah.
we know, a lot of MSPs, we're fighting those fires on incidents that don't ultimately get reported because we get them contained and under control. So that number could be a little bit skewed. Now, we got some numbers down in the bottom that really kind of cater to the SMB market. The one that really stood in front of me that I didn't know that I came out on, and I don't know why it's there twice, but law
Oh,
firms
because
are
it's
20.
doubly scary.
Yeah, there was a different one in my final there, but law firms have experienced a breach. Almost 26% of law firms. So, think about that. Are they being targeted because they're perceptionally more vulnerable? Because they know they're generally smaller in size, they're not going to have those enterprise controls. But my, oh my, do they have probably some good information behind that firewall?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, yeah, you think about with personal information, company information, um, but again, they're in the group, the category that likes to spend or doesn't like to spend on technology unless they absolutely have to. Like car
Yeah.
dealerships, I'd put in that same category, right? And a few others that are, um, last thing they want to spend their partner money on is technology. So
Yep, every dollar spent on cyber is one less in their pocket, right?
yeah,
So it becomes a little tough to sway some of those type A personalities. But I think what you're really seeing there is that marketplace is probably getting more educated to the risk now. And at the
yeah,
end of the day, that could cost them too, right? So, something to consider for those of you that might be dealing with legal, this might be a good time to start amping up those conversations a little bit. And then the other stat that I think really stands out to me here is really the 43% happened to the SMB. I go back to what I said earlier. A lot of customers kind of look at things from a fear, uncertainty, and doubt perspective and say it's never going to happen to me. We need to really change the posture of that conversation. And that's a little bit of what we're going to be showing you today to really help the
yeah,
SMB understand you're in the line of fire too. It may be non-targeted, but the automation that's available out there in the marketplace now, you're open and you're vulnerable.
yeah. But I was kind of thinking as well. One of the things that we'll cover and that we're focused on in this chat is things that really aren't all that expensive, right? I mean, they're going to cost, right? They're going to cost you. You're going to have to pass on the cost to your partners, but they're not the $30-40 a seat kind of expenses and
Yep.
experiences that might scare them off, right? So you can start small, and I think that's what we're focused on here is the little things that you can do to prevent within your accounts these numbers from going there. So you
And
could
that's
switch
probably a
right
good
over to
segue right
yeah.
into that
Yeah,
discussion, Frank.
perfect. So yeah. So let me talk through these. So we've been Nodeware is a continuous vulnerability management tool. It's been around 6-7 years, actually a little bit more. So very sophisticated and but simple to use product. And one of the things that we talk with a lot of MSPs about is it's preventative, right? It's proactive. And I think all four of these pillars really are fall into that proactive and or educational standpoint that in a subtle way is a proactive effort, right? If you can proactively get the employees of your company to make sure that they are utilizing the MFA that's been put on their system and not, dragging and, requiring, I don't have time for that. Well, you have time to be hacked and you have time to be, ransomware, then shut up and move on. Just do it. Same with security awareness training, right? I mean, that is, helping people identify phishing and other things that can let the outsiders in, and just be smarter about their practice, their day-to-day practice. Continuous monitoring, right? I mean, if you're not actively looking at what's on your network, what the risks are, what known vulnerabilities are in there, then again, you're just leaving yourself open, and that's continuous monitoring, in particular, that Nodeware provides is a great fix into that. And then this fourth pillar, right, is kind of a basic, and it's probably there's maybe one or two others in this category, if you will, of being, stopping the elements like zero trust. But even a zero trust environment is a little bit more complicated to administer. But email security is this pretty straightforward, simple tool. So that's kind of if we look at these four pillars, each of these independently is a again, preventative, proactive, looking ahead, left to boom. Take your pick on the terminology, right? But they're all the things that you as an MSP need to make sure that your partners, your customers are utilizing to reduce those risks and reduce the chance of those numbers becoming reality for your customers.
And when I look at each one of these, Frank, too, it also speaks to what we just talked about a moment ago, where there's a large human factor out there as well. Each one of these
Absolutely.
tools is taking the human into consideration, or actually trying to aid the human from being that vulnerability point within there. One of the things that I think is becoming more prevalent from what I see over here at VCIO Toolbox and in my discussions with customers that are doing vCISO work and really trying to help their customers shore up their cyber programs, for insurance or just, good security, good old-fashioned security concerns. MFA is the one that's amazing because it always seems to be partially implemented. It's on most applications, but not all applications, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
um, and that's something that I want you guys to come away with today thinking about too. To do all my customers have MFA across all applications? And I'll give you my favorite one. And have you talked to the marketing department to ask where they're putting data? Because those guys love to try new tools.
Oh
And a
yeah.
lot of times they're uploading your
And
customer
they're all
lists there,
cloud-based tools, of course, right? So
and we don't even know what they're going into. So look there. The other one I love on this page is security awareness as well, because usually those people that are not compliant in security training are the same ones that are clicking on the links for phishing and other concerns, right? So you can really isolate where your problems are. Obviously,
yeah,
from a continuous monitoring standpoint, patch management's one thing, but understanding where the threats could impact those assets is huge. And there's a lot of talk in the marketplace today about asset governance, especially as it relates to a governance risk and compliance program. And certainly, we've seen it with our customers that are doing asset management. You see assets that are perfectly fine on the product lifecycle scale, and don't haven't aged out, have current warranties, that have bad CVEs. My own machine, I wake up and all of a sudden it goes from a 900 to a 250. Now I know it's time to go patch up if I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. No, and that's all good points. And I think one of the things, again, if you're an MSP and you haven't had a customer ask you about, hey, I've started seeing this compliance requirements, or I'm thinking about what kind of cyber insurance I want to either get or try to renew. The first, these are almost the first four elements of those considerations that you need to be looking at. So we can talk more about that if there's any thoughts or questions, but these really play well into that those frameworks and those requirements that are either there or are coming really, 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 really soon.
So, probably the next thing we need to talk a little bit about, Frank, is, why do the SMB community that we serve need to care, right? And why should they take action? One of the things that the we have an opportunity with as an MSP is really elevating our stature too. If you're finding yourself in that commodity zone with your customers where they just think of you guys as the people that service things and help you out with problems, this is a huge opportunity to elevate your stance there and really show them that you're there to fill that leadership void and really be that CIO that might not exist at that company, or be that advisor to the IT director, bringing an outside perspective. Because remember, some of those guys in those roles only have what they do to lean on. They're not getting the benefit of what we see every day, multiple customers operating in different ways and seeing the best practices that come from them. So really, we can be there and be their steward, and they need that leadership capability. The other reason, and we've touched upon it, multiple times already in the short time we've been talking, but that human firewall. Not understand, every statistic shows that the humans are the threats. And even those, some of us that are professionals, we can get shocked by some of the emails
Oh,
that we see and how legitimate
way
they
too easy.
look.
They're way too,
You know,
way too
not,
easy.
not to mention, the texting and the other avenues of communication that we have. So we really need to, look at our security program and say, it's not just one thing to have it check the box. We've got a security awareness tool and we're sending out those, but who's not compliant? What can you do to help encourage them to get compliant? What action can you take if they're compliant? Do your policies line up to give you the capability to remove those individuals that don't want to participate appropriately from a security concern? That goes beyond what a tool can do, and really requires the MSP to be that guiding light to help bring those answers there. We've
Yeah,
touched upon cyber insurance, and one of the things that that I hear often is, can I get my claim paid? And more importantly, these days, right, fraud's becoming a real issue out there in the marketplace as well. You can't just check the box on cyber insurance. You need to be really working with your customers. And I'll throw this little caveat out because our legal teams told us never fill out the form for your client. Help guide them, but let them be responsible for the form because you don't want to be in that chain of custody. But what we really are trying to do here is help the customer know if you check that box, you need to really be doing it. And if you're not doing it, then what are the steps we're going to take to get there to get you insured? But more importantly, should you have a breach, get that claim paid. Because don't kid yourself, folks. Insurance companies' number one job is to figure out how not to pay you. And then if they do have to pay you, to figure out how little they can pay you for each claim. They're not big monster profitable engines for any, shocking reason other than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and actually, I've just had a couple interesting discussions with some of the channel insurance partners like DataStream and Fifth Wall, and right, and they're driving a lot of new sort of elements into this game, and they're learning. So if you if you got any questions or you're just starting to look, right, look those guys up because they're on top of it, and what particularly for relative to what a what an MSP needs to help their customers get there, either to get insured or to stay insured, right?
And let's be very clear here, right? Cyber insurance is really a write-a-boom problem, right? We've had the event, and now we have to go correct it. And what we're really speaking about here is some left-a-boom tactics we can take in order to make sure that hopefully we don't end up at write-a-boom and have to invoke that. But when that time comes, because it will come, that we've got the right tools in place for it. And there's even new firms out there like Quark that are starting to look at that left-a-boom problem and look at cyber warranties as a way to protect you and get you the capabilities to make those corrective actions before the big problem hits. Finally, that last question is, should you direct hire or outsource? So you've really got to work with your customers and you've got to help them understand where they sit in that spectrum too. A lot of our, while we want to be everything to all of our customers, we know that some of our customers graduate from the SMB tier to a mid tier. And if they're looking to, to expand there, it might be the right time for them to outsource that VC or that CIO service too. But you can very easily be a part of that process. You can help them with the hiring. You can be part of the interviewing, which of course is going to tie you closer to that resource when they do come on board and protect you if that change from fully managed to co-managed occurs.
Yeah.
On the other side, when you look at the SMB community, I said it earlier, they need that CIO. They need somebody that really can help them formulate the plans. In VCIO Toolbox, building a roadmap is a big part of our world. But the real reason we do it is to incorporate potentially third-party objects into that budget plan as well. So now at the end of the year, that CFO who's managing 7 or 8 different budgets within his business, hopefully is coming to you and going, hey, Frank, that budget plan that you put together, can you send it to me so I can incorporate it into there? If we're managing that, we're very sticky. So you've got to really look at this whole concept of where does my SMB sit and how do I stay sticky in that process? Do I need to be the CIO or do I need to be part of the process of bringing in the person who I might be answering to down the road as they graduate?
Well, and I'll add a fourth, not a fourth, but another letter into the mix, right? A CISO, right? If
Yep.
security play, and we actually provide some of those services within our professional services team. But some MSPs have added inside full-time CISOs that are fractionized out to their customers, right? Because customers need that. Just it's a little bit of that third-party perspective, right? Sort of looking at things beyond what the MSPs might be providing, and the CISO can kind of lay out that strategy for that. And it's kind of like a penetration test, right? A penetration test, in a lot of these compliance and insurance requirements and other tools are really, really, I mean, they have to be done, right? I mean, it's just no matter, no if, and, or but they can't be done by the MSP, right? So you got to, it's Fox can't be watching the hen house. So you got to be looking for outsourced resources. It could be CIO, CISO, or even a specific activity such as a penetration test, which are usually recommended or driven by the CISO as part of their strategy development. So just another piece of the resourcing and outsourcing relevant here.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Thank you for adding that. So from there, we kind of want to now move into some of the tactics you can take. And, we talked a little bit about continuous security a moment ago. Frank, maybe you can jump in and share what we're looking at here.
Yeah, yeah. So these four things, kind of are the, I guess, kind of really the specifics of what we meant by, continuous monitoring and the other elements. But the shadow IT we talked about, somebody bringing in a Dropbox or putting their credit card and using a marketing tool that is just, you know, the down channel impacts of these different tools, if they're not managed right, are pretty scary. But even in the financial element, right, it's somebody joining Dropbox as an example, getting their own account when they already have a corporate account that they should be using, right? So it's kind of could be a wasteful element of that shadow IT presents. So that, but shadows, there's multiple shadows going on with that shadow IT. Bringing on a device, somebody adding an asset into the network. Maybe it's as simple as a printer. Oh, I'm just going to connect my printer to the Wi-Fi and use it because I do a lot of printing on my own and I just want to have it accessible. Well, that has ports and has issues and has vulnerabilities on them that can be exploited. So any of those kinds of outside elements. Remediation direction. So you might know that printer, or you might find a server that's got some vulnerabilities or something else going on in the environment that you found out because you've been looking proactively. Now you need to actually have some direction and not be spending hours and hours a day on finding out what you should do. Okay, I found this CVE 2023-1065. It's on a few of my systems. Well, now what do I do? And normally you'd have to go search. So one of our tools in particular within Nodeware, sort of gives you some guidance and recipes and very soon some abilities to actually do the patch from within the program and or the remediation. So it may not just be direction only, but actually the function of completing that remediation directly within the tool. And again, all we're doing here in all of these is being proactive, looking for things ahead of time that could be exploited. And that all those really then tie into this asset governance, Brian, right? Which is what you're more an expertise on, right? Is pulling these different elements together and making sure that whether it's a government body or whether it's an association body or something combination, that's so you got to be prepared for it. And by doing these things, you're prepared. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about what you guys do to deliver that.
Yeah, from an asset governance perspective, it goes back to a little bit to what I was talking about earlier. you know, Continuous monitoring gives us the tools to basically be able to understand this data and bring it in and marry it up with the assets themselves. Our concerns are a few different things when we're looking at the assets and from an asset governance perspective. Yeah, we care about product life cycle, right? Not so much about the customer being under warranty, but is that asset supportable still, right? Can it get firmware updates? Can it get patches as are required? Security fixes, those kind of things. Second thing we're looking at is age as well, right? What's our refresh schedules? Do we have the right technology? And even though it's still supported, is that technology providing enough, for what our requirements are? Firewalls have evolved, right? UTM capabilities have evolved, and we need to look at those kind of things. Then we take the data from the from a vulnerability scanner like Nodeware, but what we're able to do then is understand what vulnerabilities are hitting that system at that moment, right? We can have that perfectly healthy system. Life cycle wise, it's fine. Everything looks like it's up to date. All characteristics seem to be where it is. But now, lo and behold, it's susceptible to some CVEs, and some of those are based on the applications they're running, not because of the patch management. So simple Windows patch management is not going to tell you that. Oh, my machine's patched up. When I was talking to Frank earlier before this call, I was talking about how my Mac falls off, and half the time it's an Adobe problem or it's some other problem. It's not a Mac specific problem. And while I'm talking about a desktop there, think about your enterprise, right? And all those different apps that come in, kind of reflects that shadow IT component to a degree as well.
Yeah,
so we're able to take this data and, now we can provide the evidence that would be required if a breach came through through those machines, and we can show that we did everything within our responsibility at that point in time to do it. And while VCIO Toolbox can help you automate that process in conjunction with it with Nodeware, the real reality is you need those data sources no matter how you're handling it to make sure that you can really have a handle on, are my assets susceptible, and kind of lock down that point. And that's probably the easier point than the human point, right, Frank? But it gives us that capability.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a critical piece.
So Alexander's asking a quick question here about how we feel about the cybersecurity business value benchmark. And I'm going to profess, Alexander, I might not be as familiar with that as you might be hoping I am. I don't know if you've got some insight into that, Frank.
No, I haven't heard of that specific one either, but it kind of get depend on the day. There's another framework out there. I think the critical, and we'll have to go look at it, but I think I'm sure it comes back to 80% follows the NIST or CIS frameworks and guidelines, right? That you know Australia, essentially in Australia, right, is following certain elements. The elements in Europe, and I'm sure Gartner's trying to just kind of create a best of all of them. But it's coming down to, and what we've seen in general, right, is if you're mapping well to NIST as an example in the new CSF 2.0, which Nodeware does, by the way, I'll just slight plug there. But if you're following the guidelines within that, most of other frameworks and things you're gonna be fine, right? I mean, they're all based in some way. They might change the words, they might change some of the specific requirements, but they're all trying to do the same thing. So thanks for the tip. We'll kind of take a look
And I'm
at that.
sorry that we may have not been the experts on that particular answer, but I think, Frank's spot on. When we look at what these frameworks are doing, especially from our seat, it really does come back to, there are common benchmarks that are shared across all frameworks. And really, if you look at those benchmarks from an operational, so when you look at that detect kind of point of it, it's those four pillars, right? They really lean on those controls. So, again, we'll look deeper into that. That could be a future topic for us, Frank. But
Yeah, I like it.
realistically, I think there's a lot of
Well, I
common
think
sense in cyber.
actually it kind of hinted at it jokingly, but it does bring up a valid point of, there's so many different pieces, right? I mean, you got HIPAA requirements, you've got FTC requirements for their safeguards, and they've got
Yeah.
SEC. Well, FTCs are part of SECs, but alphabet soup of of acronyms putting out frameworks and all that. I think that would be a good topic, just of okay, what are they all out there, and let's help people understand where they come and what their core is. And I think I'm pretty safe in saying that between the CIS and the NIST elements, most of those frameworks are going to be, if you're following those guidelines, you're going to be safe with other specific ones.
Yeah, I mean, the primary difference, because we were big champions for the NIST, I mean, excuse me, the CIS implementation group #1, when a customer wasn't regulated until NIST came out with their 2.0 publication, because it added, NIST 1.1 had this as well, but as it related to incident recovery and response, because if you really look at CIS, it's looking more about the actual activity. It's not looking at the response side. So it's looking at left to boom, preventive maintenance, if you will, and
Okay.
then not really taking into account what happens if that event happens and now you need to respond. And, NIST has had that in since 1.1. But now you take this part about governance, and you're going to hear more and more about that topic out in the marketplace. I'm sure any of you on LinkedIn have seen it on your daily streams. Governance is becoming the big part. And again, it goes back to that real reality of the human factor, right? Somebody needs to be overseeing these results that come out of all the great automated tools that give us incredible information. But if nobody's, it's the tree that falls in a forest syndrome, right? If
Yeah.
nobody's looking at that information, it means nothing. So, some of those best practices, and, I look at cybersecurity, and while it's a very intricate and complex item, at the end of the day, there's just a lot of common sense that ties to it too. Look at
Yeah.
those things that are common sense, and then figure out how to intricately solve that problem internally.
Yeah.
Frank,
I
anything
agree.
else you want to add, on the continuous security conversation at this point?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered what we need to. And that's, if any other questions come up, we can answer, but I think let's go on to the next piece.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we always talk about too is how do we monetize some of these things, right? It's easy to monetize potentially a tool in your stack because you can just add it to your managed service costs. But how do you really go about building this deliverable of being a leader to your customer and more importantly, not just giving it away? That's a terrible thing that I see a lot of MSPs doing is giving away the knowledge that they possess under a standard IT support contract. Quarterly business reviews, as an example, and obviously that's a big part of my world, were meant to be engagement points with the customer. It was meant to help you report out without bragging of everything you did, right? And that performance focus. It's an opportunity for you to learn more about your customer so you can get more strategic with them. What are those business goals and challenges, not just the tech goals they're aiming for? And then ultimately help them by guiding them to a roadmap. And if done effectively, yeah, we win in this terms of products. But that is just a meeting type. That is not being a VCIO or a VCSO in your marketplace. So you really need to start saying, how do I level that up? And if I level that up, how do I generate more revenue with it as well? Now, the easiest thing I can say to you is if you're helping your customers do any kind of benchmark or framework assessment and you're not charging them for it, you are
Mm.
getting killed. CIS and the CSF assessments start at about 5 grand. When you start getting into regulatory assessments, helping your customers with the prep process, those can go from anywhere from 20 grand up to 50, 60 grand. Maybe a couple hundred for your large enterprise
Who's getting that,
customers.
Brian? If the MSP is not doing that, who's I mean, who do they need to kind of go
Well, then
replicate?
they can reach out. There are certainly firms like yours, Frank. IGI has that level of staff that can, on folks on staff that have that expertise that can do it. Find your partner for that, right? There are hiring consulting firms that are not looking to take the MSP business. They're not looking to be that operational partner to do that. So for you too, we talked about it earlier at the customer's perspective, should they hire or outsource? You have to look at your own skill sets and say, should I hire or outsource for this role? But my messaging is very simple. Don't give it away because you can spend a lot of time and effort doing these things for no return, and it can end up costing you in other ways, potentially getting that resource that can be that VCIO as an example. So when you
Absolutely.
look at, the deliverables that should be included in here, when I look over on the left, there's some strategic deliverables that you can build into a VCIO service. Participating in their executive meetings. Now, this is different than going to meetings with their executives. What I'm really saying here is being that fly in the wall in the room that they can refer to when they're having strategic planning sessions where they can ask, can our technology support this? What are the technology ramifications if we go in this direction? What do we need to know, right? You can be that knowledge resource. And if you're in those meetings, you're also getting some intel that you might not get otherwise as to what's really happening in that business. The second thing is being part of strategic plan development. So you're in that meeting, they're starting to build that plan, and in parallel, you're helping them understand what are the technologies they need. This could go beyond just a simple roadmap that's talking about the products and services you get, but helping them understand where the gaps might be in policy and procedure today, what they might be missing in order to do that. Maybe looking at even some of those outside applications that they're considering, like new ERP systems, and getting in front of some of the things that you usually are the tail end. I'd like to use the word beneficiary, but usually the tail end survivor of, or lucky individual with when they bring in that new product and now you've got to acclimate to it. So that's another area that we can really engage. And then obviously we want to keep that plan up to date. And that is something that, we can be engaged on from a strategic level as well. Frank, do you have any thoughts there, in terms of some of the things you're seeing out in the marketplace with
No,
some of your partners?
I think I like going back to the point that these are things that you can deliver either directly or indirectly, right? And don't be afraid to call out resources. As you said, our professional services does risk assessment and virtual CISO, right? So if you want to, you know, these are critical elements for you to kind of be the master of the domain, if you will, right, in terms of your customer management. And so, some of these things you might not have the capacity, right, or might not have the time or the skills. but they're there and available. So I don't think you can't do this because you don't have it today.
And to Frank's point, if you look at your own skill sets and you really see that you're going to probably cause your own business some risk if you try to do it alone, reach out to that partner because, there's many out there that are not looking to infiltrate your turf, right? And I was a big fan of co-opetition when I was an MSP. We had particular partners that we brought in for those skill sets that we just couldn't either afford to put on staff or had enough utilization to bring on staff. I go back to the early days of CCIEs, right? When we had those large scale network operations, that might be something that we did 2 months out of the year within our business, not enough to bring on a resource full time. And we would find those resources and partner up with them for those projects. Similar can be done here. Now, another thing that's key in that vCISO component is really the service deliverables, right? We need to help them understand IT policy and procedure. If they don't have the policy documents that are required, if you understand that there's areas that are emerging, I mean, AI is a perfect example, and the use of AI is something that new policies are starting to come into consideration, especially with groups with large marketing organizations and things like that as well. It really is an area that you can move in with your customer, and that could be a project-based thing or built into a recurring revenue because these things need to be reviewed regularly as well. And that covers kind of the new policy development. Security awareness program oversight. We talked about it earlier. Who are those chief offenders? Do you know? Do you know what the struggle is? Are they just not getting to the emails and don't care? Or are they struggling because they know they don't really know the answers and they're afraid to expose themselves too? When we look at phishing reports, that's another big one. If you're seeing the same person as a click offender over and over, hey, we sent out 100 emails, but only 10 clicks, but they were all from Frank here. I need to go have a conversation with Frank, right? Or I need to let the people on the team know it was coming from one individual, although Frank would never do that.
No.
And then the last thing is, do they have any social engineering capabilities as well? The phone is still real. I know most of you don't like to use it anymore, but those calls come in and they're still fishing for our information on the phone, and email and in text messaging and things that we might not be able to control. I'm sure many of you have gotten that text message, hey, your boss wants to reward the team. Let's go get some gift cards.
Yeah.
They can look real at times, right? So we need to make sure people are covered there. How about yourself, Frank? Anything you think we need to add kind of in that policy bucket there?
No, I think you covered it well. I think we're yeah. Let's move
And
along.
this is a hot topic of late too, because as litigation gets larger, if you don't have the right policies there and somebody did something egregious and you didn't tell them that they couldn't, that's something that can nullify a claim as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
just kind of, keep thinking those terms a little bit outside the technical box in terms of how to service your client. Um, so we've got a question here as well from I believe it's Alexander again. In my last CIO role, this was an area that we were looking at due to being a U.S. subsidiary of an EU company, but I'm unsure if others are looking in that area that much. And I'm assuming you're talking about kind of the policy area, Alexander.
He actually above there, he said the corporate sustainability
Oh,
reporting
corporate
directive.
sustainability reporting directive. Yes. So that's, there's more of that, and we call it here what the ESG directives that are coming into play as well. We're seeing more and more of that upcoming as well. But Frank, why don't you, do you have some thoughts on that one?
No, I'm not as familiar with that ruling, so actually can't apply. But I know some of our profession our our CISOs in house probably could. So I can try to get
Yeah.
some
I know
some
we've been
information.
talking about the ESG conversation because it's kind of a happy balance too, right? Some
Mhm.
of that belongs to the CIO, but some of that's really more CFO, COO ownership in terms of conversation, because we're really talking about green initiatives also in buildings, in the green initiatives in terms of products and the way they operate facilities and the tools that they're using. Those tools, of course, like computers and stuff, do come back to the IT folks, it's been a debate between me and my CTO as well. Are we ready to bring ESG into VCIO Toolbox? Is it really a conversation that the MSP community is having? But we're definitely seeing it at the corporate level. Most of especially in the major corporations where they're trying to be good corporate stewards
Yeah.
as it relates to sustainability and green initiatives. And they need to measure that, sometimes for offset credits too, quite frankly. But it's not something yet that has trickled down as much in the conversations that we're having in the MSP marketplace.
Yeah,
Certainly, if
I
you
think
guys are, seeing,
where that is playing more is again can sit at the back or the high end in the cloud infrastructures, and right there's some really cool initiatives around on the liquid cooling, right, versus fan cooling is
yeah.
great reduction in power. So it's kind of up the chain a little bit more than we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So
Yep, but definitely an area for all of us to keep an eye on and how that's going to
absolutely,
impact the MSP community and their conversations. So, moving on from policy, it's then building out programs for your customer. We need to have we have to help them develop a cyber defense program. This is really us looking at the tools that they're utilizing, whether they're from our stack or what the customer's providing, and saying, do we have that defense in depth approach to securing our environment? Are we hitting our zero trust requirements if that's what we're looking for? Do we have the assemblage of resources around to really make sure that we're handling the automated side of this as well? And have we developed that program to make sure that we have the detection measures for it also? Obviously, Nodeware is an example of one of the cogs that fits in that entire detection wheel with the MFAs and with the email securities and the identity managers and those things that really
yeah,
help us, avoid some of that.
yeah,
The sec
absolutely.
Anything, Frank, there you want to add?
No, I think that's hitting it. I think well, it's kind of one thing to have the programs and be able to identify them. We're seeing a lot of MSPs that are using Node or other tools, and they're kind of a data overload. So I think part of the subtlety of, if you will, of these programs is to make sure you have prioritization within your proactivity, right?
Yeah, no,
A
that's a
couple of
great
big words
point.
there, but all of these, whether it's an assessment and penetration test, as an example, once a year, twice a year, right? It's one thing to do the test, but if you're not sort of listening to what the report's telling you and what the output is, then you're kind of just wasting money and you're keeping yourself up to risk. So I think in all of these, there's an element of, okay, take a deep breath. Let's look at this. Let's chunk it down and make it manageable. And I think some of these activities, as you called out here, are doing that. But I think that's, again, another further back in the head.
Yeah.
Just, okay, this is what we got to do. Let's figure out the right mapping to do it.
And then, as we continue down that program bucket, we've already spoken to it a little bit, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but, do you have an incident response, incident management process? Really look into yourselves. Do you truly have an incident response process that you can take to the streets with your customers? Now, the real reality is if an incident happens, you might be asked to step away so a third party can come in and do the forensics, but there's still a lot of response that needs to occur before that step gets invoked. So, do you have a communication plan? Do you have steps for an incident? Do you have steps for different types of incidents? Do you have that workflow built out? Those are areas you can get into, and you can really also expand on that by holding tabletop exercises.
I was just going to bring up the tabletops
Yep.
I've participated in a number of those, and they're always just fascinating to sort of play through and do it. Part of that, tabletop is knowing what you can do and what you can't do, right? And when you know what you can't do, who are your resources to go to? Again, our services team has incident response support and sort of consultation. We don't do the physical forensics any longer, but we can help you, guide you. So there again, this all goes back to, you know, uh, knowing what needs to be done, knowing what you can do, and then filling the gaps with resources that between the two of us we can help you a lot of ways. But there's also just other resources out there to keep
Yep.
yourself attuned and know where to go to when you need to go there. Because when you need to go there, you're not gonna have the time to go find and evaluate people. So
And I do have to say, and I'm looking at the names in the group that have joined us today, Frank, that this probably is things they already know, but I'm going to say it out loud anyway. It's not just good enough to have backup. That is not your incident response plan that you know how to recover that data if it's there. How do you recover a security incident? How are you going to isolate the network? How are you going to contain the problem? How are you going to then work to eradicate it? Those are the things that you need to consider in this process.
yeah, absolutely.
Finally, the last thing, and we've touched upon it through this stream of conversation as well, but really just doing an annual risk assessment at a bare minimum. Now, I'm a big fan of once you establish, a risk assessment or framework assessment, it's very easy to upkeep quarterly and really stay on top of at a bare minimum. But you should be doing this annual application risk assessment. What's happened? Has that company been breached and that breach been reported since last year? Tools are, unfortunately breached at any time. You got to look then and say, how did they handle that breach event? Did they take steps to fortify the product? Are we still good utilizing that product? And an annual review of those vendors gives you an opportunity to do that. Obviously reaching out to your vendors periodically, not just that initial due diligence questionnaire, but asking them to share what updates they've done will help you understand if they're continuing to evolve from a security perspective, or did they do the one-time audit? Now I've satisfied my requirement, and I'm going to lean on that forever. So we need to understand, the people that we're doing business with, and what are they doing as well. And that's a big part of this program. And it's usually something that, unless that company has a true risk manager, isn't being done at all in any way, shape, or form today. I go back to a little anecdote that came to me from one of my customers. He was doing a business canvas model with his client, which really gives you a 360 view of tech, but it also sometimes opens up the door on security problems that you didn't know about. And one of the things that this particular client that he was working with had a doctor's office, and that doctor, was a small town, small suburban doctor, and he was kind of the Pied Piper of technology for years in his community. So anything he did, the other doctor said, "Oh, if Joe's doing it, we should all do
You
it,
do all the
right?"
work
That
as
kind of
well.
thing. So one of the things he started doing that this MSP uncovered during this process was that he started outsourcing call center, appointment confirmation to the Philippines. Nothing wrong with that. But when the MSP dug deeper, they said, how do you get those appointments to them? Do you send them a daily list? And he was like, no, we gave them access to all scripts. They're able to come in remotely and they can see what the calendar says. And then the question was asked, and do those users have just isolated credentials to allow them only to see the calendar? Nope. And 18 doctors in the community were all exposing their entire all scripts to these
Oh,
external call centers, right?
oh,
So, these are the things that customers don't think about, that you can go in there and really take a leadership role and be able to kind of think differently. And that wouldn't even come up. It's certainly not coming up through a tool, but wouldn't even come up through a framework assessment necessarily. It comes through digging deeper as an advisor, as a consultant, asking about the vendors they use, and really understanding where some of the weaknesses and vulnerabilities might be as well.
yeah.
The final area is testing, right? As part of a vCISO program, you can do some testing too. You want to look at asset configurations. And I know that's an area that, Nodeware can come into play for you as well with the continuous scanning, because that's going to feed you some of that configuration information, let you know which applications are potentially not strengthened to where they need to be.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Frank, I'll let
there's
you take the next one because you've talked about this, repeatedly, and it's a big part of your world.
yeah, and I think this is a good sort of point to kind of call out a definitional element here, right? Which is vulnerability assessments versus a penetration test. They're often kind of intermixed in usage and in terminology by end users and by MSPs in particular. And I think this really comes a 1-2 punch in terms of the distinction. So if you start with a penetration test because it's required, it's really, again, think of it as truly external, a white hat hacker trying to break in, figure out paths that the bad guys would also follow, and report where their findings, where are there things that, because this and this are in this environment that gave us the ability to do that, and what needs to be fixed. And so that's again kind of a one time, could be once a year, it could be twice a year, it could be continuous. We have a PenLogic, it's a version of a penetration tests that can be done throughout the year. But ultimately, it's an outside look, once, a one-time event. Whereas, vulnerability assessments, vulnerability management is really looking at from an internal perspective, what am I seeing? What are the vulnerabilities? Oh, those things they called out on the pen test, have they been fixed? Right? Are they still there showing? Now that I know what to look for, is that still an environment? Is that still a patch that needs to be done? Is that still some remediation that's missing? And so those two really are a yin and a yang, a one and two, whatever analogy you want to say. They are really important to do together, and to support each other. And one starts and drives the other. I mean, ultimately, vulnerability management enables the next time they do a pen test to be a much more hardened test, right? Or a successful in the element of prevention, or of not enabling those paths to be discovered. So it's really a critical play there to look at both of them and understand the distinction.
And I would add there too, this is a perfect example of the outsource piece of it. As the MSP, you're here to help them, in a vCISO role, you're here to help guide them to these things. Yes, you might be working with your tools to bring in some of that vulnerability component, but you should always outsource that penetration test to a third party.
Yeah.
This one builds transparency for you and your customer because it's not a rooster watching the hen house kind of situation. But two, you're going to learn things that are going to help you improve in that process as well. At least I certainly saw that when I was an MSP.
So good
All
stuff.
right. So, folks, I think that, is kind of the end of our presentation for today. I'd like to open up the floor for any Q&A, and then we'll put up some information on how you can get in touch with Frank and myself. Actually, I'll put that up right now while we see if any other questions are coming into play. In the meantime, Frank, anything new or exciting happening at Nodeware in the near future that you want to share?
Yeah, actually, thanks for asking. Actually, we are launching a very pretty foundational, groundbreaking element to Nodeware. Right, we've done to date. It's been identify, scan, and provide remediation recipes or guidance. By the end of the month, we're actually enabling within the program to do the patches or the remediations that have been identified right from within the program. So it's going to start with Windows devices, which is majority of what we're dealing with. And then we'll add other functionality. But this is really, in our world, I think, a game changer, just enabling time. Again, we're talking about identifying and proactively fixing something, but normally the MSP might have 3 different things to do, and they'll get to it. But with this now, you'll be able to identify and say, "Oh, do it," right, and schedule out the timing of the restarts and the reboots and things that need to be done. But we're looking forward to doing that, and love to show some anybody interested here a demo on when that's ready, and love to get it going. So
That's
that's
pretty
our
awesome
big
because
exciting news.
yeah, I mean, reducing the window of risk, right? I mean, that's what we're
Yeah,
all trying to do in this entire conversation. So that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah.
From our standpoint, I'll say that VCIO Toolbox, we do have a release coming out this weekend. So a number of new features coming into it, a lot of them focused on the presentation view. You get full control of dashboards and tabs now, so you can change that out very easily and change your data elements very easily, as well as some new integrations with Hoodoo and Salesforce coming into play as well. That's just a few of the high level ones coming in, but keep your eyes out. Those of you that are VCIO Toolbox customers, check things out Monday. You'll see some new things available to you.
Mhm.
In the meantime, Frank, it doesn't look like any further questions are
We
coming in
answered
at this
everybody's
point.
question that ever was even in their head. We answered
Either
your
we did a
question.
really
Yeah.
good job, or we didn't cover the right things. But
No.
Frank, I've got your email up here, but tell people where they could schedule a demo with you.
Yeah, they can again, the easiest is send me an email, or they can go to www.nodeware.com, and on there's a partner site, and you can sign up, and just give us your information, and we'll contact you and set up a time to demo. And the demo is 10-15 minutes, get a pretty good feel, and then we do a 14-day POC if they want to run it in your environment, full access, and you get it underway. So happy to walk through that, and love to get people getting more proactive and managing the vulnerabilities. I mean, again, this is these tips we've walked through today are really fundamental if you're just starting to add some extra cyber services into your mix, or if you're looking to improve and be more productive in reducing that risk environment. So love to help you in that game.
Certainly, if you'd like to learn more about VCIO Toolbox and some of our governance, risk, and compliance capabilities, I encourage you to visit us at vciotoolbox.com. There you can either request a 15-day trial or you can schedule a demo as well. So, love to have a conversation with you. But more than anything, I hope you're taking away that there's some really nice opportunity for you to go deeper with your customers here. And, there's some very easy and actionable steps you can do to really make sure that your clients are proactively being secured and that you've got the right foundational tools in play. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Frank, I always want to thank you for joining me, and
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you,
And
and thank
uh,
you, Milton, and everybody for joining. Appreciate your
and we'll
time.
see you again sometime soon.
All right. All the best.